Kale squinted against the dazzling light as he stepped through the massive archway into the Apex arena. The splendor of Xylos was still jarring after the perpetual twilight of the Asteria Belt mining colonies. Everything here gleamed, from the polished marble floors to the gilded viewing boxes where the elite of the core worlds lounged in decadent luxury. His worn utility jacket and patched cargo pants stood out starkly against the opulence, drawing curious and disdainful glances from the attendants. He wasn't here for their approval. The weight of an entire colony's fate pressed down on his shoulders, far heavier than any disapproving stare. Asteria's primary oxygen generators were failing, and the guild-controlled supply chains charged prices that would bankrupt them within months. But there was another way, the prize for defeating the champion of the Apex arena: unlimited resources or information. Information that could lead to alternative supply routes or technologies beyond guild control. "State your business," demanded a slim attendant with augmented eyes that scanned Kale's body, no doubt cataloging his outdated gear and lack of enhancements. "I'm here to challenge the champion," Kale replied, his voice steady despite the exhaustion of his journey. The attendant's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "The entry fee for challengers is 10,000 credits. Kale handed over the chip containing nearly everything he owned, plus the pooled savings of half his mining crew. The attendant's eyes widened slightly as the verification completed. "Very well. Proceed to the preparation chamber. The challenge ceremony begins in 1 hour." The preparation chamber was cold and clinical, a stark contrast to the ornate arena beyond. Kale methodically checked his minimal equipment: a kinetic blade, magnetic grapple gauntlets, and a reinforced exoskeleton frame beneath his clothing that boosted his natural strength and reflexes. Nothing fancy compared to the core world tech, but reliable. Each piece had saved his life multiple times in the treacherous asteroid fields. A holoscreen on the wall flickered to life, showing highlights of previous matches. Kale hadn't come unprepared. He'd studied every scrap of footage he could find during the long journey to Xylos. But seeing her in combat still took his breath away. Seraphina, the Starfall champion, moved like liquid light across the arena. Her silver-white hair flowed around a face of haunting beauty, her movements graceful yet devastating. For 27 years, she had remained undefeated, her mastery of localized gravitational fields allowing her to crush opponents without ever touching them. The footage showed her lifting a massive crawl warrior and slamming him into the ground with a casual gesture, then switching to a delicate manipulation that tore a combat droid apart piece by piece. What the footage couldn't capture was the strange, pulsing energy signature that surrounded her like an aura, visible only when she unleashed her full power. Some said it was pure photonic manipulation. Others claimed she could bend space-time itself. Whatever it was, it had defeated 218 challengers. The door slid open, and a stern-faced official entered. "The ceremony begins. Follow me." The roar of the crowd hit Kale like a physical force as he walked onto the arena floor. Thousands of spectators filled the tiered seating that rose like a mountain around the circular combat zone. Holographic displays magnified his image 100-fold, broadcasting to millions more across the Xylos system and beyond. From the outer reaches of the Asteria Belt, announced a booming voice, a mining navigator and demolitions specialist. An unknown challenger with no arena record. Kale Devaros. The crowd's response was tepid, punctuated with jeers and dismissive laughter. Betting boards flashed across the arena walls, showing odds of 500 to 1 against him. The announcer's voice rose again. "And now, the undefeated sovereign of the Apex arena, holder of the longest championship reign in modern history, the Luminous Death, the Starfall champion, Seraphina." The arena erupted in adulation as a platform rose from the opposite side. Seraphina stood motionless, her form-fitting combat suit a gleaming white that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. Up close, Kale could see that her eyes were an unnatural violet, glowing faintly from within. Her face was a perfect mask, devoid of emotion or concern. They approached the center of the arena, where a ceremonial platform rose from the floor. An official in elaborate robes stepped forward. "The challenge has been issued and accepted under arena law," he intoned. "Victory in the Apex arena is absolute. The winner claims all that the defeated possesses: knowledge, resources, oath-bound service. This is the ancient compact." Seraphina's gaze finally shifted to Kale, her eyes assessing him with cold indifference. When she spoke, her voice was melodic yet distant, as if coming from somewhere beyond the arena. "I am bound by the compact of the Apex. The one who defeats me in honorable combat may claim anything within my power to give. I will acknowledge them as my master until death, or until they release me from service." She paused, her lips curving in the faintest suggestion of a smile. "As it has been for 27 years, I shall remain undefeated." The official nodded solemnly. "The challenge is set. Combat begins in 30 seconds. As they returned to their starting positions, the arena floor began to shift. Sections rose and fell, creating a landscape of varying elevations. Holographic barriers sprang up, some solid, others permeable but damaging to pass through. Kale recognized the pattern from his research, a standard configuration for testing mobility and adaptability. A piercing tone signaled the start of combat. Seraphina didn't move immediately. She studied Kale with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen. Then, with a casual gesture, she sent a wave of force toward him. Kale barely activated his magnetic grapple in time, anchoring himself to a metal section of flooring as the invisible wave threatened to hurl him backward. Even braced, he felt his bones vibrate with the impact. This was just her testing strike. The real assault began immediately after. Seraphina raised both hands, and the gravity around Kale intensified tenfold. His exoskeleton creaked under the pressure, servos whining as they fought against the crushing force. He triggered a release mechanism, detaching a section of his grapple line and rolling sideways as the gravitational field continued to compress the space he'd occupied. The crowd murmured in surprise. Most opponents were immobilized by her first attack. Kale had no illusions about matching her power. His only advantage lay in observation and the unexpected. In the asteroid fields, miners learned to predict microgravity shifts by watching dust patterns and vibration harmonics. Here, he focused on Seraphina herself. There, when she manipulated gravity in multiple locations, her energy signature fluctuated briefly on her left side. And again, a microsecond delay when transitioning from compression to repulsion. Seraphina's attacks grew more elaborate. She created gravity wells that pulled in opposite directions, threatening to tear him apart. Kale used his grapple to navigate between the fields, timing his movements to her patterns. Each time he evaded, her attacks intensified. "Impressive mobility," she commented, her voice unchanged despite the exertion. "But futile." She gestured sharply, and a section of flooring beneath Kale liquefied as she altered its molecular structure. He sank to his knees before firing his grapple at an overhead barrier, pulling himself free. 20 minutes into the fight, Kale was bloodied and exhausted. His right arm hung useless after a particularly vicious gravity crush. Yet he'd accomplished something important. He'd mapped her patterns. Seraphina relied on overwhelming power but followed predictable sequences. Years of easy victories had made her efficient but inflexible. More crucially, he confirmed his theory about her power source. The energy signature that surrounded her pulsed in rhythm with a barely visible implant at the base of her neck. When she exerted maximum force, the implant glowed brighter momentarily before stabilizing. It was time for his gambit. Kale activated his kinetic blade and slashed at a nearby holographic barrier. As expected, the barrier's energy field reacted violently, sending electrical feedback through the arena systems. Similar to how demolition charges could trigger cascade reactions in asteroid mining. Seraphina frowned as the barrier flickered. Pointless vandalism won't save you. But Kale wasn't targeting the barrier. He was creating a power fluctuation. He threw his magnetic grapple directly at her, not to strike, but to create a field that would interact with her gravity manipulation. Predictably, she caught the grapple in a gravity field, suspending it midair. "Is this desperation?" she asked. "This is strategy," Kale replied, triggering the grapple's emergency overload. The magnetic pulse collided with her gravity field precisely as she attempted to crush the grapple. The interaction created a momentary feedback loop in the arena's power grid, and more importantly, in the energy flowing to Serafina's implant. For just a fraction of a second, her power faltered. The violet light in her eyes flickered. Kale was already moving, ignoring the pain of his injuries. He charged directly at her, something no opponent had done in years. Serafina's hands came up to unleash another gravity wave, but the connection to her implant was still recalibrating. His shoulder connected with her midsection in a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. In the same motion, he pressed his kinetic blade, not activated to cut, but to conduct, against the implant at her neck. The jolt of energy caused the implant to short-circuit momentarily. Serafina's eyes widened in genuine shock as her connection to her power source faltered completely. Before she could recover, Kale pinned her arms and pressed the blade more firmly against the implant. "Yield," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Absolute silence fell over the Apex arena. Tens of thousands of spectators watched in disbelief as the undefeated champion lay immobilized by an unknown challenger from the mining colonies. Serafina stared up at him, her violet eyes wide with an emotion he couldn't identify. Shock, rage, perhaps even a hint of fear. Then something else flickered across her face. A spasm of pain as automated systems within the implant registered her defeat. "I yield," she whispered, the words seeming to cause her physical pain. The official's voice trembled slightly as he announced, "The champion has yielded. By the law of the arena, victory is awarded to Kale Devaros." Kale released Serafina and stood, swaying slightly from exhaustion and his injuries. The crowd remained silent, the magnitude of the upset registering across thousands of stunned faces. Serafina rose to her feet with fluid grace despite her defeat. Her face had returned to its mask-like state, but something burned in her eyes now. Resentment, certainly, but also something more complex. The official approached with a ceremonial collar that glowed with embedded technology. The victor must accept the champion's oath and control. Kale hesitated, suddenly uncertain about the implications of his victory. This wasn't what he had come for. He wanted information, resources to save his colony, not ownership of another person. But before he could speak, Serafina knelt before him, her movements precise and formal. The official placed the collar around her neck, where it seamlessly merged with the implant at her nape. A series of lights pulsed along its length, and Serafina's body tensed momentarily. "By arena law and the compact of Xylos, I acknowledge you as my master," she said, her melodic voice flat and controlled. "My knowledge, my power, my service are yours until death or release." She raised her eyes to his, and in them, Kale saw a cold, burning defiance beneath the forced obedience. "Master," she said, the word weighted with an unmistakable promise of retribution. Kale stood frozen, victory suddenly feeling like the beginning of something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The reaction from the arena officials was immediate and hostile. As Kale was escorted from the combat floor, he noticed the increased security presence and the urgent communications flowing between the arena's upper management boxes. This wasn't just about an unexpected defeat. He had disrupted something important. "This way for the victor's ceremony," said an attendant, attempting to guide him toward an ornate doorway. Kale hesitated. The passage didn't lead toward the main prize hall he'd researched, but to a more private section of the complex. His instincts, honed by years of navigating treacherous asteroid fields, screamed danger. "The ceremony is traditionally held in the Hall of Champions," he said casually. The attendant's expression flickered. "A special accommodation has been made for this." unprecedented situation. From behind them, Serafina spoke, her voice cool. He means they plan to eliminate you before you can claim your full rights as victor. The technocrat guild that manages the arena has significant investments in my continued championship. The attendant paled. The champion speaks out of turn and with falsehood. The champion speaks as bound by oath to serve her master's interests, Serafina countered, her violet eyes gleaming. And his survival is currently chief among them. Kale made a split-second decision. Then we're leaving. Now, what's the fastest way out? Service corridors, East Quadrant, Serafina replied immediately. But they'll be sealing the complex. We have approximately 3 minutes before full lockdown. Kale nodded and started moving, acutely aware of his injuries but pushing through the pain. Lead the way. Serafina moved with fluid efficiency, guiding them through a maintenance door and into a labyrinth of service corridors. Behind them, alarms began to sound. What exactly did I win besides making powerful enemies? Kale asked as they hurried through the dimly lit passages. Me, Serafina replied without emotion. More specifically, control of my power and the access codes embedded in my neural implants. The guild has spent decades developing and refining my abilities for their purposes. I didn't come here to own anyone, Kale said grimly. How fortunate for both of us, she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Unfortunately, the guild does not recognize victory disclaimers. They reached a security checkpoint where 2 guards moved to intercept them. Before Kale could react, Serafina made a subtle gesture. Both guards slammed into the ceiling, then dropped unconscious to the floor. Your control of my implant is incomplete, she explained as they continued. The guild maintains certain override protocols, but your victory transferred primary command functions to you. Kale processed this information as they navigated the complex. So you're helping me escape because you now hold my control codes, and if they kill you, those codes revert to guild control. My freedom from their direct management would end. She glanced at him. Self-interest, nothing more. They reached a service dock where cargo vessels delivered supplies to the arena. A sleek personal transport sat on the landing pad, its hull gleaming with the same pearlescent white as Serafina's combat suit. My ship, she said, heavily monitored and restricted, but currently our best option. As they approached, a squad of black uniformed security personnel emerged from a connecting corridor, weapons raised. Halt! Shouted the leader. By order of Archon Valerius, surrender the champion and control codes immediately. Kale looked at Serafina. Can you handle them? A flicker of something, perhaps surprise at being consulted, crossed her face. Yes, but it will alert the guild to our exact location and power usage. Do we have another choice? No. Then do it. Serafina raised her hands, and the air around them seemed to ripple. The security team was lifted bodily and pressed against the walls with crushing force. Not enough to kill, Kale noted, but certainly enough to incapacitate. We have less than 1 minute before reinforcements arrive, Serafina said, already moving toward the ship. The vessel's security systems recognized Serafina, but a secondary authorization request flashed on the entry panel. It requires your command as master, she explained, her voice tightening on the last word. Kale placed his hand on the panel. Override security, authorization. Kale Deveros, victor of the Apex Arena. The ship accepted the improvised command, ramp extending as the engines hummed to life. They boarded quickly, Serafina taking the pilot's position with practiced ease. I suggest leaving Xylo's space immediately, she said as her fingers danced across the controls. The guild maintains significant influence with planetary security. Set course for the Nexus sector, Kale decided. The chaotic neutral zone between major power blocks would give them time to regroup and plan. As the ship lifted off, defense turrets on the arena roof swiveled toward them. Serafina executed a series of evasive maneuvers that would have impressed even the most seasoned asteroid pilot, weaving through Xylos' crowded skylanes with precision that bordered on prescience. They're activating the orbital defense grid, she announced calmly as they broke atmosphere. Prepare for jump to hyperspace. The stars blurred around them as the ship accelerated beyond light speed, leaving the opulent world of Xylos behind. Only then did Kale allow himself to slump in his seat, the adrenaline ebbing to expose the full extent of his injuries and exhaustion. You need medical attention, Serafina observed dispassionately. I'll live, Kale replied, studying her. Now that they were temporarily safe, he could see the subtle changes in her demeanor. The champion's cold confidence remained, but there was tension in her shoulders, a wariness in her eyes. Are you all right? She looked at him with genuine surprise. My physical condition is optimal. That's not what I asked. My emotional state is irrelevant to my function, she replied automatically, then frowned slightly, as if the response had been programmed. Not to me, Kale said firmly. I don't want a servant, Serafina. I didn't come to the arena for that. Then you should have researched the victory conditions more thoroughly, she said sharply. What did you come for? Information. Resources. Kale winced as he shifted in his seat. Asteria Belt is dying. The miners' colony where I'm from can't afford the guild's oxygen prices anymore. Our generators are failing, and we're months away from colony collapse. Something shifted in Serafina's expression. So you sought the champion's prize. Access to guild resource networks. Yes, I didn't expect this. Serafina was silent for a long moment. The guild maintains control of all essential resource production and distribution in this sector. They artificially inflate prices for outer colonies to force dependency or abandonment. We suspected as much, Kale said grimly. However, she continued, there are alternative supply routes and independent manufacturing facilities in the fringe worlds. As champion, I have access to that information, which is now yours by right of victory. Kale leaned forward despite his pain. You'll help us. I am bound to serve my master, she replied, her tone neutral, but with an undercurrent of resentment. And I possess the information you seek. Stop calling me that, Kale said. My name is Kale. Serafina regarded him coolly. The control implants respond to recognized authority designations. Master is the primary command key. Then we need to change that, Kale muttered. Can the implants be removed? A shadow passed across Serafina's face. Not without risk of permanent neural damage. The Technocrat Guild designed them to be irreversible. There has to be a way, Kale insisted. Perhaps. Serafina turned her attention back to the ship's controls. But first we must survive. The Guild will not relinquish their most valuable asset without deploying every resource at their disposal. Asset, Kale repeated, distaste evident in his voice. Is that how you see yourself? Serafina's violet eyes flickered briefly. It's irrelevant how I see myself. It's how I've been seen and used for 27 years. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's systems. Hyperspace tracking detected, Serafina announced. They're following our jump signature. How is that possible? Kale asked, alarmed. Hyperspace tracking was supposed to be theoretical technology, not actively deployed. My vessel contains prototype guild technology, Serafina explained, already adjusting their course, including tracking systems linked to my neural implants. Kale moved to the co-pilot's seat despite his injuries. Can we disable them? Not without disabling critical ship functions. Serafina's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. But we can use them to our advantage. The tracking is bidirectional. I can access limited guild network information through the connection. Her eyes unfocused briefly, the violet glow intensifying as she interfaced directly with the ship's systems. There are 7 pursuit vessels deployed. 2 are already on intercept trajectories. Options, Kale asked, automatically falling into the clipped communication pattern used during crisis situations in the asteroid fields. Recommend drop from hyperspace near the Carrick Nebula. The radiation interference will disrupt tracking temporarily and provide cover for a secondary jump. Kale nodded. Do it. The stars reappeared as they dropped back into normal space, the swirling gases of the Carrick Nebula filling the view screen with ominous reds and purples. Serafina immediately angled the ship toward the densest part of the cloud. Pursuing vessels will emerge at our exit coordinates in approximately 40 seconds, she reported. Kale studied the navigational display. There, that gravity shadow from the neutron star. Can we slingshot around it to mask our signature? Serafina raised an eyebrow, seemingly impressed despite herself. Yes, the maneuver carries substantial risk. I'm a mining navigator, Kale reminded her. Calculated risk is my specialty. As they executed the dangerous maneuver, skimming close enough to the neutron star's gravity, well to feel the ship's structural integrity groan in protest, Kale observed Serafina more carefully. Her movements were fluid and precise, but there was something mechanical about them, as if she were following programmed routines rather than making intuitive decisions. How long have you had the implants? He asked as they completed the slingshot and prepared for another jump to hyperspace. Since childhood, Serafina replied without looking away from the controls. I was identified as a potential conduit at age 6. The initial implants were installed at 8. Full integration occurred at 12. A conduit, an individual with natural affinity for energy field manipulation, she explained. Rare enough to be valuable, common enough to be expendable. The matter-of-fact way she described her commodification sent a chill through Kale. Your family allowed this? A bitter smile flickered across her face. My family sold me to the guild. The payment was enough to elevate them to lower-tier citizenship on Xylos. Before Kale could respond, the ship shuddered as a grazing hit struck their shields. One pursuit vessel anticipated our maneuver, Serafina announced, her voice calm despite the danger. Evasive action ineffective at this range. Kale thought quickly. The implants, you said I have primary command functions. Can I authorize expanded power usage? Serafina's eyes widened slightly. Yes, but it would alert the guild to our location with extreme precision. They already know where we are, Kale pointed out. And we need to get out of here now. She nodded. Command authorization required. Kale took a deep breath. I authorize full power usage. Security override. Kale Victor Prime. He improvised the code, hoping the system would accept it. The collar around Serafina's neck pulsed with light, and she gasped as energy surged through her body. The violet glow in her eyes intensified until it spilled out in luminous tendrils. Targeting pursuing vessel, she said, her voice resonating with harmonics that hadn't been present before. She extended a hand toward the view screen, and Kale felt the ship's gravity shift as she projected her power beyond the hull. On the tactical display, the pursuing guild vessel suddenly veered off course, tumbling end over end as if caught in an invisible whirlpool. Its engines flared in desperation before failing completely. Jump coordinates set, Serafina announced, the glow already fading from her eyes. Entering hyperspace now. As the stars blurred once again, Kale noticed Serafina's hands trembling slightly. Are you all right? Power expenditure exceeds recommended parameters, she replied, her voice strained. Temporary neural pathway overload. I will recover. I'm sorry, Kale said. I didn't know it would hurt you. Serafina looked at him with genuine puzzlement. Pain is an expected component of optimal performance. The casual acceptance in her voice disturbed him more than any display of suffering could have. That's not right, he said quietly. It is what it is, she replied, turning away. We have evaded immediate pursuit. I recommend continuing to the Nexus sector as planned. I can provide the information you seek regarding alternative oxygen supply once we establish temporary sanctuary. Kale nodded, but his mind was already shifting focus. The oxygen supply for Asteria Belt remained crucial, but he now faced a more immediate moral problem. He had inadvertently become the master of a person who had been enslaved through technology and conditioning since childhood, and the organization responsible would stop at nothing to get her back. They arrived at the Nexus sector after a series of calculated jumps designed to confuse any pursuit. The region lived up to its chaotic reputation, a patchwork of independent stations, minor colonies, and free-floating habitats, all existing in the political void between major power blocks. Serafina guided their ship to a nondescript docking port on a station called Meridian's Folly. This facility operates outside Guild influence, she explained. Temporary sanctuary is possible, though not guaranteed. As they secured the ship and prepared to disembark, Kale studied the control collar around Serafina's neck. Will that draw attention? The technology is disguised as high-end augmentation, she replied. Common enough in the Nexus not to raise immediate suspicion. However, Guild agents will have detection equipment calibrated to its specific frequency. Kale frowned. Is there any way to mask it? Limited options exist, Serafina said. The ship's medical bay contains a neural dampening patch designed for emergency situations. It would reduce the collar's signature temporarily, but also limit my access to enhanced abilities. Let's use it, Kale decided. I'd rather have you at reduced capacity than risk immediate detection. Something flickered in Serafina's eyes, surprise, perhaps, at his prioritizing their safety over her utility. She retrieved the patch from the medical bay and applied it to the base of her skull, wincing slightly as it integrated with her implants. Neural damping active, she reported. Estimated effectiveness, 6 to 8 hours before the systems adapt. They disembarked, Kale wearing a breath mask common to asteroid miners to hide his facial features, while Serafina had transformed her appearance with remarkable efficiency. Her distinctive silver-white hair now appeared black, her glowing violet eyes dimmed to a natural blue through some function of the implants. Meridian's Folly was a sprawling maze of repurposed modules and makeshift extensions, its corridors teeming with a diverse population typical of border stations. Merchants hawked exotic goods alongside information brokers and technology smugglers. The air was thick with the mingled smells of various cuisines, mechanical lubricants, and too many species living in close quarters. We need secure lodging and access to unmonitored communications, Kale said as they navigated the crowded main concourse. And medical attention for your injuries, Serafina added. When Kale looked at her in surprise, she continued, your physical condition affects our survival probability. It is logical to prioritize your recovery. Right? Logical. Kale couldn't help but wonder if there might be something more than cold calculation behind her concern, but he dismissed the thought. Lead the way. Serafina guided them through a series of increasingly narrow passages until they reached a section marked in faded lettering as Residential Block 7. She approached a door with peeling paint and placed her hand against a scanner that looked barely functional. To Kale's surprise, the scanner lit up with a crisp blue light, and the door slid open. Smoothly. Guild's safe house, Serafina explained as they entered a small but well-appointed apartment. Officially decommissioned 3 years ago when the Guild consolidated operations in this sector. The decommissioning was administrative only. The facilities remained functional but removed from active monitoring. Kale looked around warily. How do you know this? I have been required to memorize all Guild operational protocols and facility locations across 17 sectors, she replied. Knowledge deemed necessary for potential deployment as an operative in addition to arena combat. They really planned for everything, Kale muttered. The Guild's primary directive is absolute control through comprehensive preparation. Serafina moved to a concealed panel in the wall, revealing an advanced medical station. This will address your injuries more effectively than standard commercial facilities. As Kale reluctantly allowed himself to be treated by the automated system, Serafina accessed a hidden terminal. I am transferring the information regarding alternative oxygen supply routes and independent manufacturing facilities, she said, her fingers moving across the interface with practiced precision. The data includes contact protocols for 3 non-Guild affiliated suppliers who operate in proximity to the Asteria Belt. Kale watched her work, conflicted. She was fulfilling exactly what he had come to the arena for, yet the circumstances made it feel wrong somehow. You don't have to do this because you're compelled, he said finally. I'm not holding you to that oath. Serafina paused, turning to look at him with an unreadable expression. The compulsion is not something you can simply dismiss. The implants are designed to ensure compliance regardless of verbal releases. There has to be a way to deactivate them, Kale insisted. Perhaps. Serafina returned to the terminal. But such information would be among the guild's most closely guarded secrets. Then that's what we need to find, Kale decided. Serafina's eyes narrowed slightly. Why would you prioritize that over your colony's survival? You have what you came for. Because no one deserves to be controlled through technology embedded in their body, Kale replied firmly. Including you. An admirable sentiment, she said, her tone neutral. But the practical challenges are significant. I navigate asteroid fields where a miscalculation of 1 degree means death, Kale reminded her. I'm familiar with significant challenges. A proximity alert from Serafina's implants interrupted their conversation. Multiple individuals approaching, she reported, moving smoothly to a defensive position. Heat signatures and movement patterns consistent with professional hunters. Guild agents. Unlikely. Response time too rapid for official channels. She cocked her head slightly, processing information from her implants despite the dampening patch. Probability high for independent contractors. Bounty hunters. Kale moved away from the medical station, checking that his kinetic blade was accessible. How did they find us so quickly? The guild would have broadcast a substantial bounty immediately after our escape, Serafina explained. And this station prioritizes information flow over privacy. Our arrival would have been noted and reported. For distinct sounds echoed from different points around their apartment, magnetic clamps attaching to the exterior walls. They're preparing for synchronized breach, Serafina observed, her body tensing. 4 entry points. Recommend immediate evacuation through maintenance shaft. Kale shook his head. They'll expect that. Standard mining colony defense tactic against raiders. Control the engagement zone. He quickly assessed the apartment layout. The central room gives us sight lines to all entry points. We make our stand there. Serafina raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Your combat experience is with mining raiders and asteroid hazards. Guild-contracted hunters employ different tactics. Then we adapt, Kale said, moving furniture to create defensive positions. Can you access any of your abilities with the dampening patch? Limited localized gravity manipulation, she replied. Approximately 20% of normal capacity. Save it for when we need it most. Kale instructed, positioning himself behind an overturned table as the first cutting sounds began at the entry points. Let them think you're completely neutralized. The first breach came from the ceiling. A circular section cut free and dropped to the floor, followed immediately by a canister that began spewing dense smoke. Before the hunter could descend, Kale fired his mining grapple through the hole, satisfied by the grunt of pain that followed. The remaining 3 entry points breached simultaneously. Armored figures poured into the apartment, weapons trained on the smoke-filled center. Combat assessment, Kale asked, quietly as they remained hidden behind their barricade. 6 hostiles. Mixed weaponry. Coordinated, but not military precision, Serafina replied calmly. Primary objective appears to be capture rather than elimination. Targeting focused on neural signature consistent with my implant profile. One of the hunters, taller than the others and wearing distinctive red-striped armor, gestured for the team to spread out. The guild wants the conduit intact, a modulated voice announced. The outsider is expendable. Negotiations seem unlikely, Serafina commented dryly. Kale nodded. On my signal, create a gravity distortion between us and the main group. Just enough to disrupt their aim, nothing that will drain you. He waited until the hunters advanced further into the room, then triggered the remaining charge in his grapple gauntlet. The magnetic pulse disabled the lights, plunging the apartment into darkness broken only by emergency strips and the hunter's helmet lamps. Now, Kale whispered. Serafina made a subtle gesture. The air between them and the hunters rippled, causing the light beams to bend and waver. Disoriented, the hunters hesitated, their coordinated movement faltering. Kale launched himself forward, keeping low. His kinetic blade activated with a soft hum as he struck at the nearest hunter's leg joints, not to kill, but to immobilize. The hunter went down with a cry of pain and surprise. Two others turned toward the sound, firing energy weapons that scorched the wall behind where Kale had already rolled away. Serafina used her limited power to pull a ceiling panel loose, dropping it onto one hunter while Kale tackled the other. The leader in red-striped armor cursed. Containment field. Now, one of the remaining hunters deployed a device that hummed ominously, projecting a field of pulsing blue energy. Serafina stiffened as the field washed over her, her implants responding to the specialized technology. Neural interrupt sequence activated, she reported, strain evident in her voice. Dampening patch failing. Kale saw the leader raising a specialized capture weapon aimed at Serafina. Without hesitation, he threw his kinetic blade, striking the device and causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. The leader recoiled, cursing loudly. "Get to the terminal," Kale shouted to Serafina as he engaged the hunter with the containment device. They grappled briefly before Kale slammed the hunter's helmet against the wall, cracking its visor. Serafina moved with fluid efficiency despite the neural interference, reaching the terminal and executing a rapid sequence of commands. The apartment's defense systems, dormant but not deactivated, surged to life. Concealed turrets emerged from wall panels, targeting the remaining hunters with precision stun blasts. The leader, recovering from the exploded capture device, drew a sidearm. Guild override, Chimera protocol. To Kale's horror, Serafina froze, her body going rigid as the command triggered something in her implants. "Authority recognized," she said, her voice suddenly hollow. "Awaiting instructions." The leader laughed. "Stand down and prepare for extraction, conwit." Kale felt a surge of desperate anger. "Override," he shouted, hoping his status would counteract the command. "Primary authority, Kale Victor Prime." Serafina's body trembled as conflicting commands fought for control of her implants. The violet glow in her eyes flickered erratically. "Interesting," the leader said, advancing cautiously. "But incomplete command authority. The guild never transfers full control to arena victors, a safeguard against exactly this scenario." Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Kale lunged for the containment device the fallen hunter had dropped. Understanding his intent immediately, the leader fired, the energy blast grazing Kale's shoulder and sending waves of pain down his arm. Despite the injury, Kale managed to grab the device and activate it, not aiming at Serafina, but at the leader. The specialized field wasn't designed for standard neural systems, but the concentrated energy was enough to disrupt the leader's armor systems. The modulated voice dissolved into static as the armor support functions failed. Serafina, still struggling against the conflicting commands, managed to regain partial control. With visible effort, she extended her hand toward the leader, creating a localized gravity field that lifted the armored figure off the ground. "Command, authority, contested," she ground out, clearly fighting internal resistance. "Temporary override, initiated." The leader struggled helplessly in midair. "This is impossible. Guild protocols are absolute." "Apparently not," Kale said, retrieving his kinetic blade from the floor. "Serafina, can you access the ship systems from here? We need to leave immediately." She nodded tightly, still maintaining the gravity field with one hand while interfacing with the terminal. With the other, remote launch sequence initiated. Docking clamps release in 40 seconds. "What about these hunters?" "The stun field will maintain integrity for approximately 5 minutes after our departure." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The Guild's safe house protocols include an automated evidence elimination sequence after unauthorized access. This facility will effectively erase itself within 10 minutes. Kale raised an eyebrow. "Erase as in molecular disassembly," she replied. "Non-lethal, but extremely thorough. They will survive, but retain no evidence or memory of our encounter." They made their way to a maintenance shaft that connected directly to the docking area, Serafina maintaining her tenuous control over her implants through visible effort. As they approached their ship, Kale noticed how her movements had become less fluid, more mechanical. The competing command authorities are creating neural pathway conflicts, she explained when he asked. The dampening patch preserved some autonomy, but the Chimera protocol initiated core programming sequences. Once aboard, Serafina immediately connected to the ship's systems, her implants interfacing directly with the controls. The ship detached from the station and accelerated smoothly into open space. Setting course for the fringe worlds, she announced. Multiple pursuit vectors detected from Meridian's Folly. Can we outrun them? Affirmative, but the command conflicts are affecting navigation efficiency. Serafina winced as feedback from her implants caused visible pain. I require assistance. Kale moved to the co-pilot seat. Tell me what to do. The neural dampening is failing completely, she said, her voice increasingly strained. The Chimera protocol is attempting to establish guild control priority. Countercommands are necessary. What kind of countercommands? Reinforcement of primary authority, she replied. You must claim me fully. The arena victory established baseline authority, but the guild left secondary protocols intact. Kale recoiled at the implication. I'm not going to reinforce this master-servant nonsense. It's not about belief, Serafina ground out, frustration breaking through her controlled facade. It's about the programming language the implants recognize. They respond to specific command structures. Her eyes met his, desperation visible beneath the flickering violet glow. Please. The alternative is complete guild control re-establishment. Swallowing his distaste for the situation, Kale nodded. Tell me exactly what to say. Place your hand on the collar, she instructed. When he did so, the metal felt warm beneath his fingers, pulsing with the same rhythm as the implant it connected to. Now state, by right of arena victory, I claim full command authority over Conduit Serafina, overriding all secondary protocols. Authorization, Kale Victor Prime. Kale repeated the words, hating every syllable but recognizing the necessity. As he spoke, the collar glowed brighter, and Serafina gasped, her back arching as the implants processed the command. When the glow subsided, her posture relaxed slightly. Command authority updated, she reported, her voice steadier. Chimera protocol temporarily suspended. Temporarily? Kale asked, concerned. The guild designed multiple redundancies and recovery systems into the implant network, she explained, already returning her attention to navigating their escape. Without access to the core control architecture, we can only implement surface-level overrides. Then we need to find that core architecture, Kale decided. Where would it be? Serafina was silent for a moment, considering. Project Chimera is the guild's most classified initiative. Full documentation would exist in only one location, the guild's primary research facility on Helios Prime. Then that's where we're heading, Kale said, after we make a detour to the Asteria belt with the oxygen supply information. Serafina turned to look at him, genuine surprise evident in her expression. You still intend to fulfill your original mission? Despite the guild's pursuit, I didn't go through all this to abandon my people, Kale replied firmly. We'll deliver the information, ensure they have the contacts and routes they need, then continue to Helios Prime. The risk is considerable, Serafina observed. The guild will expect you to return to Asteria, which is why we won't stay long, Kale said. Just enough to transfer the information securely. Serafina nodded slowly. A logical approach, if dangerous. She hesitated, then added, thank you. For what? For maintaining your original purpose despite complications, she replied. It suggests reliable character parameters. Kale smiled wryly. Was that almost a compliment? It was an observation, she said, but there was something less mechanical in her tone now, a hint of the person beneath the programming and conditioning. As they accelerated toward the outer reaches of the Nexus sector, prepared to jump to hyperspace, Kale found himself studying Serafina with new appreciation. Despite decades of guild control, despite implants designed to override her autonomy, Something fundamentally her remained intact, resilient and determined. And if that core self had survived so much, perhaps there was indeed hope of freeing her completely. Their arrival at the Asteria Belt mining colony was tense but swift. Cale had sent an encrypted message ahead to his closest associates, arranging a clandestine meeting in an abandoned processing facility on the outskirts of the main habitat. The familiar site of the colony, a sprawling collection of interconnected modules anchored to a large, resource-rich asteroid, filled Cale with both relief and anxiety. This had been home for most of his life, yet now he returned as a fugitive, potentially bringing danger to his people. The oxygen recyclers are operating at less than 30% efficiency, Serafina observed as their ship approached. Her implants allowed her to scan and analyze the colony's systems from a distance. Estimated sustainability: 43 days without intervention. Then we arrived just in time, Cale said grimly. Can you detect any guild presence? Serafina closed her eyes briefly, focusing on the data streams her implants could access. No dedicated guild vessels in proximity. However, 2 commercial transports show communication patterns consistent with guild informant protocols. Spies, but not hunters, Cale translated. That buys us some time. They docked at an auxiliary port, one typically used for maintenance drones rather than passenger vessels. The smaller berth would attract less attention and was conveniently close to their rendezvous point. Sarah, Marcus, and Dr. Elaine Tanner, Cale's most trusted friends, were waiting when they arrived at the abandoned facility. Their expressions shifted from relief at seeing Cale alive to wary curiosity when they noticed Serafina. You actually did it, Sarah said, embracing Cale briefly before stepping back to assess him with critical eyes. When we received your message, I wasn't sure whether to believe it. Cale, Dr. Tanner said, her experienced gaze immediately noting his injuries despite the treatment they'd received. You need proper medical attention. Later, Cale replied. We don't have much time. He gestured to Serafina. This is Serafina. She has the information that will save Asteria. Marcus eyed Serafina suspiciously. You're the arena champion, the one who's never been defeated in 27 years. Until now. Serafina inclined her head slightly. That is correct. And you're helping us. What? Sarah asked bluntly. Before Serafina could respond with what would likely have been a reference to her compelled service, Cale interjected. Because we share a common enemy in the Technocrat Guild. They've been artificially inflating oxygen prices to force colonies like ours into bankruptcy or abandonment. We suspected as much, Dr. Tanner said, but suspicion isn't proof. We have more than proof, Cale replied, nodding to Serafina. We have alternative supply routes, manufacturing specifications, and contact information for independent producers beyond guild control. Serafina produced a data crystal from a hidden compartment in her suit. This contains complete schematics for retrofitting your existing oxygen generation systems to improve efficiency by approximately 63%, as well as encrypted communication protocols for 3 non-guild affiliated suppliers. Marcus accepted the crystal cautiously. This is guild tech, he observed. High-level encryption. Yes, Serafina confirmed. And it includes override codes for guild inspection protocols. When their ships dock, these will allow you to present falsified compliance data while operating independently. Dr. Tanner's eyes widened. That's extremely valuable information. The kind people disappear for possessing, which is why we can't stay long, Cale said. The guild is hunting us, and they'll eventually check here. What did you do, Cale? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Winning the arena is one thing, but you've clearly stepped into something much bigger. Cale exchanged a glance with Serafina before answering. The guild has been using the arena as a control mechanism for something called Project Chimera. Serafina isn't just a champion. She's what they call a conduit, someone with natural abilities they've enhanced and controlled through technology. For what purpose? Dr. Tanner asked sharply, her scientific curiosity engaged. Unknown, Serafina replied. The final objective of Project Chimera is compartmentalized. Even conduits are not informed of the ultimate goal. But it's big enough that they're throwing significant resources into hunting us down, Kale added, which means we need to keep moving. Can you implement the changes with what we've brought you? Marcus nodded slowly, studying the data crystal. With this? Yes. It'll take time, but this gives us everything we need. Then our part here is done, Kale said, though the words pained him. We have another mission now. Which is? Sarah asked. Kale looked at Seraphina, finding a way to free her from guild control completely, and maybe exposing whatever Project Chimera really is. Dr. Tanner stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Before you go, I'd like to examine those implants, if you'll permit it, she said to Seraphina. I may not have guild technology, but I've worked with neural interfaces in mining accident victims. Perhaps I can offer some insight. Seraphina hesitated, then looked to Kale. The silent request for permission troubled him. It's your body, he said firmly. Your choice. Something shifted in Seraphina's expression, a momentary softening that revealed genuine surprise at being granted autonomy, however small. I would appreciate any analysis, she said to Dr. Tanner. The guild never allowed independent medical assessment. The examination took place in a makeshift medical area within the abandoned facility. Dr. Tanner used portable scanning equipment, carefully documenting the complex network of implants that extended from the visible collar down Seraphina's spine and into her brainstem. Remarkable engineering, Dr. Tanner murmured, studying the results. Barbaric in purpose, but undeniably advanced. The integration with your natural neural pathways is nearly seamless. Can they be removed? Kale asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. Dr. Tanner's expression grew grave. Not with any technology available to us, and certainly not without extreme risk. These implants have essentially become part of Seraphina's nervous system. They're integrated with the regions that control both her abilities and basic functions. The guild designed them to be permanent, Seraphina confirmed, her voice neutral despite the devastating implication. However, Dr. Tanner continued, there appears to be a core control module here at the base of the skull. She indicated a densely packed cluster on the scan. Everything else interfaces through it. If you could reconfigure that module, not remove it, but reprogram it, you might be able to break the guild's control without harming the functionality. Reprogramming would require access to the original command architecture, Seraphina said, which exists only on Helios Prime, in the guild's primary research facility. Dr. Tanner nodded. Then that's where you need to go. She hesitated, then added, there's something else you should know. These scans show signs of accumulated neural damage around the implant interfaces, microscopic but numerous. How often do you experience pain when using your abilities at high levels? Pain is a constant, Seraphina replied matter-of-factly. It increases proportionally with power expenditure. The casual response sent a chill through Kale. You never mentioned this. It was not relevant to operational parameters, she said. Dr. Tanner's expression hardened. It's extremely relevant to your long-term survival. These implants are slowly killing you. The damage is cumulative and accelerates with intensive use. I'd estimate. She paused, recalculating. At current progression rates, perhaps 3 to 5 years before critical neural degradation. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Seraphina showed no reaction beyond a slight tightening of her jaw. Then our mission to Helios Prime just became more urgent, Kale said, his determination renewed. We're not just looking to break guild control. We're trying to save your life. My survival is secondary to, Seraphina began. No, Kale interrupted firmly. It's not. Not to me. Their eyes met, and for perhaps the first time, Kale saw something genuine and unguarded in Seraphina's violet gaze, a flicker of hope she seemed almost afraid to acknowledge. The reunion with Kale's friends was brief but meaningful. They provided supplies, updated star charts for regions beyond guild control, and a specially modified communication array that would allow secure contact across vast distances. For when you've finished whatever crazy mission you're undertaking, Sarah explained, embracing Kale tightly. "So you can let us know you're still alive." As they prepared to depart, Dr. Tanner pulled Kale aside. "The neural damage I observed is serious," she said quietly. "But there's something else. Those implants aren't just controlling her abilities, they're suppressing something. The neural architecture suggests capabilities far beyond what she's currently exhibiting. The Guild is afraid of her full potential," Kale realized. "With good reason, perhaps," Dr. Tanner replied. "Be careful, Kale. Helping her is the right thing to do, but understand that you're dealing with forces you can't fully comprehend." With final farewells exchanged, they returned to their ship and departed Asteria Belt, setting course for the remote edges of charted space, where Helios Prime was located. "Your friends care deeply for you," Serafina observed as they enter hyperspace. "They're the closest thing to family I have," Kale replied. "We've survived a lot together in the mines." Serafina was silent for a moment. Dr. Tanner's analysis of the implants was illuminating. "You mean the part where they're slowly killing you, or the part where they're suppressing your full abilities?" Kale asked directly. Serafina looked at him sharply. "She told you about the suppression mechanisms. She noticed architectural elements designed to contain rather than enhance," Kale confirmed. "Which makes me wonder what you could do without those limitations." "Even I don't know the answer to that," Serafina admitted. "My earliest memories include the initial implants. I have never experienced my abilities without guild constraint." The vulnerability in that statement struck Kale deeply. "Then that's another reason to succeed on Helios Prime. You deserve to know who you really are, without their programming and limitations." "A concept both fascinating and frightening," Serafina said softly. Before Kale could respond, the ship's alert system activated. "Proximity warning," Serafina announced, immediately shifting to operational mode. "Vessel approaching at attack vector." "Gil," Kale asked, moving to the tactical station. "Negative. Configuration indicates independent operator. Likely bounty hunter." The pursuing ship was smaller than theirs, but heavily armed, clearly designed for pursuit and combat rather than extended travel. As they watched, it launched a series of disruptor charges that detonated in their wake, creating rippling distortions in the hyperspace field. "They're trying to force us back to normal space," Serafina explained, executing evasive maneuvers. "Can we outrun them?" "Not without risk of hyperspace drive damage from the disruptor field," she replied. "Recommend controlled exit to normal space in a location of our choosing rather than forced ejection." Kale studied the navigational display. "There, that uninhabited system. 2 gas giants and an asteroid field. Perfect for losing a pursuer." Serafina nodded approval. "Tactical assessment accurate. Initiating hyperspace exit sequence." They emerged into normal space near a sprawling asteroid field that orbited a massive blue gas giant. Without hesitation, Serafina guided their ship directly into the field, navigating with precision between tumbling rocks the size of small moons. "Our pursuer has followed our exit trajectory," she reported, entering the asteroid field approximately 40 seconds behind us. Kale moved to the co-pilot position. "This is my territory now. Let me take lead on navigation." Serafina relinquished control without hesitation, recognizing his expertise. Kale's hands moved across the controls with practiced confidence, guiding the ship through gaps that seemed impossibly narrow, using the gravitational influences of larger asteroids to alter their trajectory in ways difficult to predict or follow. "The hunter is maintaining pursuit but falling behind," Serafina reported. "Their ship design prioritizes weapons over maneuverability." "Perfect," Kale murmured, focusing intensely on the field ahead. "There's a cluster forming ahead. See that gravitational eddy? We're going to thread through it, then use this sequence." He input a series of coordinates that would take them through a particularly dense section before emerging on the far side of the asteroid field. Serafina studied the plot with interest. "The density in Segment 7 exceeds safe navigation parameters," she observed. "For standard protocols, yes," Kale agreed. "But those rocks are silicon-heavy, which means their collision patterns are more predictable. Trust me, I've navigated the Asteria Belt's Scylla passage, which makes this look orderly. Serafina nodded, something like respect showing in her expression. Proceeding with your navigation plot. As they executed the dangerous maneuver, the pursuing vessel attempted to follow, but lacked either the pilot's skill or the detailed understanding of asteroid dynamics that Kale possessed. Their sensors registered a series of impacts on the hunter's shields before it veered away, seeking an alternate route. They're attempting to circumnavigate the densest section, Serafina reported. Estimated time to intercept, 16 minutes. That gives us our window, Kale said. Once we clear the field, we can jump back to hyperspace before they emerge. They'll have no way to track which direction we went. As they navigated the final segment of asteroids, Serafina suddenly stiffened, her eyes widening. Energy signature detected within the field. Not the hunter vessel. Something familiar. Kale frowned. Another ship? No, it's resonating with my implants. She focused, the violet glow in her eyes intensifying as she accessed deeper scanning functions. It's another conduit. Here, in an uninhabited system. The signature is faint and irregular, but distinctive, Serafina insisted. Approximately 2,000 kilometers from our position, nested within a large asteroid. Kale hesitated, weighing their options. Investigating meant risking encounter with their pursuer, but finding another conduit could provide valuable information about Project Chimera and possibly the implant technology. Can you establish any kind of contact? He asked. Serafina closed her eyes, concentrating. The conduit appears to be in stasis or severely power-limited. No active response, but the energy signature pulses in a pattern consistent with distress protocols. The decision crystallized for Kale. Set course for the signature. If there's another person being used by the guild the way they've used you, we can't just leave them. The tactical risk is significant, Serafina pointed out, though she was already adjusting their trajectory. Some risks are worth taking, Kale replied. They approached a massive asteroid that showed signs of artificial modification, subtle energy dampening fields, and what appeared to be concealed docking mechanisms. As they drew closer, Serafina's connection to the other conduit strengthened. Mail. Désignation. Conduit Epsilon. Status. Decommissioned. Her voice took on an oddly formal quality as she accessed information through some shared network. Reason for decommissioning. Neural integration failure during Phase 3 enhancement. Current function. Living data storage for Project Chimera baseline parameters. They're using him as a database? Kale asked, horrified. Essentially, yes. When conduits fail integration protocols but survive, the guild repurposes them rather than terminating. The clinical way she described such cruelty spoke volumes about her conditioning. This facility appears to be an emergency backup archive, removed from primary guild networks for security. Then it might contain exactly what we need, the original command architecture for the implant system, Kale realized. Possible, but security measures will be significant, despite the remote location. They located a concealed docking port and approached cautiously. No automated defenses activated. The facility apparently relied on secrecy rather than active protection. The guild would not expect anyone to locate this facility, much less attempt access, Serafina explained. Only high-level technicians with specific clearance would know of its existence. And other conduits, Kale added. Yes, the implant network contains location markers for all guild facilities related to Project Chimera, though accessing such information typically triggers monitoring alerts. Would your access attempt have been noted? Serafina considered this. Under normal circumstances, yes. However, your command override has created unusual parameters in the monitoring systems. It's possible the alert was misdirected or categorized as a routine check. They docked successfully and prepared to board the facility. Kale checked his weapons while Serafina interfaced briefly with the station's entry systems. Basic life support is active, she reported. Minimal power allocation to non-essential systems. The facility appears to be designed for long-term autonomy with infrequent maintenance visits. The airlock cycled, allowing them entry into a dimly lit corridor. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale blue glow that gave the metal surfaces an almost underwater quality. The air was stale but breathable. Conduit Epsilon signature is strongest from the central chamber, Serafina said, leading the way with confident steps despite never having physically visited the facility before. The implant network's shared information guided her through the unfamiliar environment. They passed through several security checkpoints that responded automatically to Serafina's presence, recognizing her conduit signature as authorized personnel. Kale noted the efficiency of the Guild's systems with grudging admiration and growing concern about the extent of their operations. If hidden facilities like this existed in uninhabited systems, how much of their activity remained completely unknown to the wider galaxy? The central chamber was a perfect sphere, its walls lined with pulsing bioneural interfaces, a technology Kale had only heard rumors about. In the center, suspended in a translucent containment field, floated a human figure. Conduit Epsilon appeared young, perhaps 20 standard years, but the extensive implants covering much of his body gave him an unsettling, partially mechanical appearance. Unlike Serafina's relatively concealed technology, his implants were external and obvious, with pulsing lights and visible connection points penetrating his pale skin. Status: minimal consciousness, Serafina reported, approaching the containment field. Neural functions limited to data storage and maintenance protocols. Can we communicate with him? Kale asked softly. Limited verbal interaction may be possible. His higher cognitive functions are suppressed but intact. She reached out, placing her hand against the containment field. Where her fingers touched, the energy rippled, responding to her conduit signature. Initiating connection. The suspended figure's eyes opened slowly, unnaturally green, with the same inner glow as Serafina's violet ones. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. He recognizes another conduit, Serafina explained, but is confused by your presence and my altered command structure. Can you tell him we're here to help? Serafina hesitated. The concept may be difficult for him to process. His conditioning is more extensive than mine, and his damage significant. Nevertheless, she focused on the connection between them, apparently communicating on some level Kale couldn't perceive. After a moment, Epsilon's eyes widened slightly, and his gaze shifted to Kale with new interest. He understands you're not Guild, Serafina translated. This represents an anomaly in his experience framework. Ask him about the command architecture, if he knows how we could access it. Serafina nodded, maintaining the silent communication. He is the command architecture, in a sense. When his integration failed, they uploaded the original programming templates directly into his neural network for safekeeping. He contains the baseline protocols for all current conduits. Kale felt sick at the casual cruelty this represented, but forced himself to focus on the practical implications. Can he help us reconfigure your implants? Break the Guild's control? More silent communication passed before Serafina turned to Kale, genuine hope in her expression for the first time. Yes, he can provide the original command keys, the master access codes that override all other protocols. Will it hurt him? The question seemed to surprise Serafina. I don't know. I didn't consider that aspect. Kale moved closer to the containment field, addressing Epsilon directly. We want to free Serafina from Guild control, but not at the cost of causing you more pain. The choice needs to be yours. Epsilon's eyes focused on Kale with evident effort. A faint smile curved his lips. He says, Serafina's voice caught slightly. He says pain is irrelevant compared to the possibility of defying their control. He has been here for 11 years, serving as a living archive. If his existence can help another conduit claim freedom, he considers it worthwhile. Kale nodded solemnly. Thank him for us, and tell him we'll try to help him too, if we can. The process requires direct neural interface, Serafina explained after another exchange with Epsilon. I must connect to the containment field systems and allow him to transfer the command keys directly to my implant network. Is it dangerous? Yes, she admitted. If the guild has implemented security protocols I'm unaware of, the transfer could trigger failsafes in either or both of our systems. What kind of failsafes? Kale asked, alarmed. Neural purge. Effective termination. Her voice was clinical, but her eyes revealed the fear beneath. However, Epsilon believes your override commands have created sufficient anomalies in my security architecture to allow a successful transfer. Kale weighed the risks with growing unease. There has to be a safer way. There isn't, Seraphina said simply. And the hunter vessel will locate us eventually. This may be our only opportunity to access the command architecture. After a moment of internal struggle, Kale nodded. All right, but at the first sign of anything going wrong, we stop immediately. Seraphina's lips curved in a ghost of a smile. Your concern is unexpected. Get used to it, Kale replied. She turned back to the containment field, placing both hands against its surface. The energy responded more dramatically this time, creating a connection point that pulsed in rhythm with her implants. Epsilon raised one hand within the field, mirroring her position from the other side. Beginning transfer, Seraphina announced, her voice taking on a distant quality as she focused on the complex neural interaction. The lights in the chamber dimmed as power redirected to support the process. Kale watched anxiously as the energy field between Seraphina and Epsilon intensified, creating visible currents that flowed between them. Seraphina's body tensed, her back arching slightly as data streamed into her implant network. Epsilon's expression shifted from concentration to something like satisfaction, despite the evident toll the process was taking. The lights on his external implants flickered erratically as he channeled information through their connection. Minutes passed in tense silence. Kale maintained constant vigilance, dividing his attention between the neural transfer and the facility's entry points, aware that their pursuer might discover their location at any moment. Finally, the energy field pulsed one last time before stabilizing. Seraphina stepped back, her balance unsteady. Kale moved to support her, catching her arm as she swayed. Transfer complete, she said, her voice hoarse. Command architecture. Received. Epsilon's eyes were closed again, his body seemingly more diminished within the containment field. But the faint smile remained on his lips. Is he all right? Kale asked worriedly. Seraphina focused briefly on their connection. Weakened but stable. The transfer required significant energy expenditure, but his support systems are compensating. And you? Did it work? Partial implementation in progress, she replied. The command keys are integrating with my existing architecture. Full reconfiguration requires secure environment and dedicated processing focus. A proximity alert interrupted their conversation. The hunter vessel had located the hidden facility and was approaching rapidly. We need to leave, Kale said urgently. Can you complete the reconfiguration on board our ship? Yes, but optimal results require minimal interruption, Seraphina explained, already moving toward the exit. Combat or emergency maneuvers would compromise the integration sequence. They paused at the chamber entrance. Kale looked back at Epsilon, reluctant to leave him behind. What about him? Seraphina's expression softened. His systems are too deeply integrated with this facility for extraction without specialized equipment. But she turned back, approaching the containment field one last time. After another silent exchange, she nodded. He has provided a gift. The self-destruct protocols for this facility. Self-destruct, Kale repeated, alarmed. It's what he wants, Seraphina said quietly. 11 years as a living archive, unable to truly live or die. He asks for release, and that we ensure the guild cannot use this facility or him again. The weight of the request hung between them. Finally, Kale nodded gravely. If that's his choice, we'll honor it. But only after we're safely away. They hurried back to their ship, Seraphina interfacing with the facility's systems as they went to delay the hunter's docking attempt. Once aboard, Kale took the pilot's position while Seraphina settled into a meditative posture in the co-pilot's seat, focusing on the ongoing neural reconfiguration. The Hunter vessel is attempting to establish a hard dock connection, Kale reported as he initiated launch procedures. Their weapons are powering up. Estimated time to minimum safe distance before facility self-destruct. 45 seconds, Serafina replied, her voice distant as she divided her attention between the ship's systems and her internal processes. Kale pushed the engines to maximum, breaking away from the docking port with enough force to damage their airlock seal. The Hunter immediately fired, energy blasts scorching their shields as they accelerated away from the asteroid. Shields at 82%, Serafina reported. Hunter vessel in pursuit. Optimal self-destruct initiation in 10 seconds. Kale executed a series of evasive maneuvers, putting as much distance as possible between them and the facility while maintaining a flight path through the densest part of the asteroid field to hamper the Hunter's pursuit. Self-destruct sequence initiated, Serafina announced, her eyes still closed in concentration. Epsilon sends his gratitude. A blinding flash erupted behind them as the asteroid facility imploded, the carefully controlled antimatter reaction consuming everything within a half-kilometer radius. The resulting shockwave caught the Hunter vessel as it attempted to veer away, sending it tumbling out of control into the path of a massive asteroid. Hunter neutralized, Serafina confirmed after checking the sensors. Self-destruct successful. All facility systems and contents eliminated. Kale felt a pang of sorrow for Epsilon, mixed with hope that he had found the release he sought. Setting course for a secure location to complete your reconfiguration. The Veiled Nebula should provide adequate cover. As they cleared the asteroid field and prepared for the jump to hyperspace, Serafina opened her eyes briefly. The command keys are integrating successfully. Epsilon's gift was perfect, the original, unmodified architecture without guild monitoring protocols or control limiters. What does that mean for you? Unknown, she admitted. My neural pathways have adapted to guild constraints over decades. Operating without them will be unpredictable, but you'll be free, Kale said. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. Yes, free. The word sounded foreign on her tongue, as if she were testing a concept she'd only read about but never experienced. They reached the Veiled Nebula after a brief hyperspace jump, a swirling cloud of luminescent gases and dust that naturally disrupted scanning systems, making it a favorite hiding place for those seeking to avoid detection. Kale guided their ship deep into the nebula's embrace, finding a stable pocket where they could drift safely while Serafina completed her transformation. This should be secure enough, he said, powering down non-essential systems to minimize their energy signature. How long will the reconfiguration take? Approximately 6 hours for full integration, Serafina replied, settling into a more comfortable position. During the final phase, I will be unconscious as the command architecture rebuilds core neural connections. Kale nodded. I'll keep watch. Is there anything I can do to help the process? Maintain physical proximity, she said after a moment's hesitation. The implants recognize you as primary authority. Your presence stabilizes the transition pathways. I can do that, Kale said, moving his seat closer to hers. Serafina closed her eyes and returned to her meditative state, the violet glow beneath her eyelids pulsing in complex patterns as the command keys rewrote the very foundation of her neural interface. Kale maintained his vigil as hours passed, dividing his attention between monitoring their surroundings and watching Serafina's transformation. The collar around her neck gradually changed, its lights shifting from the guild's cold blue to a warmer violet that matched her eyes. Halfway through the process, Serafina's body tensed suddenly, a small gasp escaping her lips. Without thinking, Kale reached out, taking her hand in his. To his surprise, her fingers curled around his, holding on as if he were an anchor in a storm. I'm here, he said softly. You're not alone in this. Whether she could hear him in her semi-conscious state, he couldn't tell, but her grip remained firm as the reconfiguration continued. 5 hours into the process, the final phase began. As predicted, Serafina slipped into unconsciousness, her breathing deep and regular, but her body completely limp. The collar and visible portions of her implants pulsed with increasingly intense light as the command architecture completed its fundamental restructuring. Kale kept hold of her hand, watching with equal parts hope and concern as the woman who had been bound by guild control for nearly her entire life underwent a rebirth of sorts, perhaps her first chance at true autonomy since childhood. When the 6-hour mark approached, the pulsing lights stabilized into a steady glow, then gradually dimmed to their normal state. Serafina remained motionless for several minutes longer before her eyelids finally fluttered open. The violet of her eyes seemed deeper somehow, more vibrant. She blinked slowly, focusing first on their joined hands, then raising her gaze to Kale's face. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. Serafina was silent for a long moment, as if cataloging the changes within herself. "I feel," she began, then stopped, seemingly surprised by her own voice. "Everything is clearer. The constant background noise of guild monitoring protocols is gone." She sat up straighter, her movements more fluid than before. "The command structure has been completely replaced. There are no remaining guild control pathways. You're free," Kale said, unable to keep the smile from his face. "Yes," Serafina agreed, a wonder in her voice that he'd never heard before. "I am myself, entirely." She looked at their still joined hands, then back to his face. "You stayed. I said I would." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a new openness. "Thank you, Kale." She said his name with deliberate emphasis, as if savoring the freedom to address him as an equal rather than a master. "What now?" Kale asked. "What do you want to do with your freedom?" The question seemed to startle her. "Want?" She considered the concept carefully. "I've never been asked what I want." Choice was limited to tactical options within mission parameters. "Well, now you get to choose," Kale said gently. "Everything from here on is your decision." Serafina was quiet for a moment, processing this new reality. "The guild will continue hunting us," she said finally. "My liberation represents a significant threat to Project Chimera, and your colony still requires protection from guild reprisal once they implement the alternative oxygen supply." "That's all true," Kale acknowledged. "But it doesn't have to be your concern if you don't want it to be. You could go anywhere, start a new life away from all this. And you would release me from the arena, oath, completely? Even though by law, I am bound to your service." "The arena oath was never valid to me," Kale said firmly. "People aren't property. You've always been free from my perspective. It was the implants enforcing that control, not my will." Serafina studied him with newfound clarity, as if seeing him properly for the first time. "Then I choose to stay," she said, the words coming slowly but with growing conviction. "To finish what we've started. The guild must be stopped, not just for my sake or your colonies, but for all the other conduits still under their control." A slow smile spread across Kale's face. "I was hoping you'd say that. However," Serafina continued, "our approach must change. With Epsilon's command keys, I now have access to capabilities previously suppressed by guild limitations." "Dr. Tanner mentioned there might be more to your abilities than the guild allowed," Kale recalled. Serafina nodded. "The suppression mechanisms were substantial. Now that they're removed," she extended her hand toward a small tool on the console. Instead of the focused gravitational manipulation she'd demonstrated before, the tool simply floated to her palm with effortless precision. "Telekinetic control," Kale observed, impressed. "Among other things," Serafina confirmed. "The guild feared Conduit's full potential. Their control systems limited us to specific, manageable abilities while suppressing others entirely. So what's the full extent of what you can do now?" "I'm still discovering that myself," she admitted. "But initial assessment suggests significantly enhanced perception across energy spectrums, more precise and varied telekinetic capabilities, and something else." She closed her eyes briefly, concentrating. A sense of connection to other conduits, even at vast distances. Faint but present. Kale leaned forward, excitement building. You can locate other conduits? Potentially, with practice, she replied, which could prove invaluable in understanding the full scope of Project Chimera and possibly liberating others. Then our next step is clear, Kale said. We need to find out exactly what Project Chimera is, why the Guild has invested so much in controlling conduits, and how to stop them. There is only one place where that information would be consolidated, Serafina pointed out. The Guild's primary research facility on Helios Prime, as I mentioned before. Then that's where we're heading, Kale confirmed. But first, we should contact Asteria Belt to ensure they've implemented the oxygen solution successfully and warn them about possible Guild retaliation. Serafina nodded in agreement, then paused, looking thoughtful. Kale, there's something else you should know. During the reconfiguration, as the Guild constraints were removed, I began accessing memories that had been suppressed, fragments from before my initial conditioning. What kind of memories? Incomplete, but significant, she said carefully. I believe Project Chimera isn't merely about controlling conduits for their individual abilities. The Guild is working towards something much larger, possibly using conduits as conduits in a literal sense, channeling energy on a scale that could affect entire star systems. To what end? That remains unclear, Serafina admitted. But the Guild's Archon Valerius appears centrally involved. And whatever their ultimate goal, they've been working toward it for at least 3 generations, gradually refining both conduit selection and the implant technology. All the more reason to get to Helios Prime, Kale said grimly. If they're planning something that affects entire star systems, we need to know what it is. They set course for a secure communication point where they could contact Asteria Belt without risk of interception. As Serafina guided the ship out of the nebula, Kale noticed the subtle but significant changes in her demeanor. More fluid movements, more natural expressions, decisions made with intuition rather than calculated protocol. Whatever else lay ahead, one victory had already been achieved. Serafina was no longer the Guild's conduit or his unwilling servant. She was simply herself, perhaps for the first time since childhood. And that, Kale reflected as they prepared to jump to hyperspace, made everything they'd endured worthwhile. Their journey to Helios Prime was indirect by necessity. The Guild's primary research facility would be their most heavily fortified installation, and direct approach would be suicide. Instead, they plotted a course that would allow them to gather intelligence and resources while avoiding Guild patrols. Their first stop was a shadow port on the fringes of the Nexus sector, a sprawling black market hub carved into the remains of a shattered moon. Here, information flowed as freely as the numerous intoxicants on offer, provided one had sufficient credits or valuable trade goods. We need to know Helios Prime's current security protocols, Kale explained as they navigated the crowded, dimly lit corridors of the Shadowport, and ideally find schematics of the facility. Guild security data would normally be inaccessible through common channels, Serafina observed. However, with my reconfigured implants, I may be able to interface with information systems here to locate vulnerabilities in their networks. The information broker they eventually located operated from a converted cargo container buried deep in the Shadowport's industrial section. The Viskian female, a species known for photographic memory and natural encryption abilities, regarded them with 6 wary eyes. Guild intel, she chittered, her translator rendering her native clicks into standard language. Extremely dangerous request. Price correspondingly high. We can pay, Kale assured her, though their resources were limited. The Viskian's eye stalks swiveled toward Serafina, narrowing in assessment. You have Guild tech. Valuable. Trade partial neural scan for access to my Helios Prime packet. Before Kale could object to the invasive suggestion, Serafina stepped forward. Acceptable, with limitations. Surface scan only, focused on implant integration architecture. No access to personal neural pathways. The Viskian made a series of rapid clicks that her translator didn't bother interpreting, possibly profanity or expressions of surprise at Serafina's technical knowledge. Agreed. Follow. In a back room equipped with surprisingly advanced technology, Serafina submitted to a partial scan of her implants while carefully shielding her newly liberated command architecture from detection. In exchange, the Viskian provided access to a heavily encrypted data packet containing security protocols, patrol schedules, and partial schematics for Helios Prime. Most recent update, 17 standard days ago, the Viskian explained. Obtained from Guild Supply vessel crew during maintenance cycle. 78% verification rating. It's enough to work with, Kale decided after reviewing the data with Serafina. Thank you. As they prepared to leave, the Viskian made a warning gesture. Information flows both ways. Guild presence increased throughout sector. Unusual bounty parameters for your description. Alive, implants intact. Very specific. They must have detected the command architecture reconfiguration, Serafina surmised once they were back aboard their ship. The absence of monitoring data would trigger automated security protocols. Can they track you through the implants now? Kale asked with concern. No, she assured him. The reconfiguration eliminated all guild tracking capabilities. However, they would know that something unprecedented has occurred, a conduit operating outside their control architecture for the first time. Their next destination was a seemingly abandoned research station in a remote system. Its existence known only through data Serafina had accessed during her reconfiguration. The station had originally been established to study unusual energy phenomena, but had been evacuated during a territorial dispute decades earlier. The facility should contain equipment we can modify for our approach to Helios Prime, Serafina explained as they docked with the derelict station. Specifically, energy signature modulators that could help disguise our ship and mask my conduit resonance pattern. The station was eerily silent, emergency lighting casting long shadows through corridors where dust floated undisturbed in the minimal artificial gravity. They moved carefully through the abandoned labs, Serafina's enhanced perception guiding them to equipment that remained functional despite years of neglect. This modulation array is exactly what we need, she said, examining a device that appeared to be part of a larger sensor system. With modifications, it can project false energy signatures that would register as authorized guild patterns. As they collected the necessary equipment, Kale noticed Serafina periodically pausing, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond normal perception. What is it? He finally asked. I'm not certain, she admitted. Since the reconfiguration, I've been sensing echoes, not quite thoughts or communications, but resonance patterns from other conduits. They're strongest here for some reason. Could there be another facility nearby? Unlikely, but she closed her eyes, focusing more intently. There's something, not guild architecture, but similar resonance. Following her instincts, they discovered a sealed laboratory deep within the station. Unlike the rest of the facility, its security systems remained partially active, suggesting it had been isolated from the main power grid during the evacuation. Working together, they bypassed the ancient security measures and entered the lab. Inside, they found equipment far more advanced than the abandoned technology in the rest of the station, and evidence of research into phenomena remarkably similar to conduit abilities. They were studying natural energy manipulation, Serafina realized as she examined the records. Decades before the Guild established the conduit program. This may have been the foundation for their later work. So the abilities themselves aren't artificial, Kale observed. The Guild just found a way to identify people with natural potential and control them through the implants. Correct, Serafina confirmed. And according to these records, they determined that such abilities follow genetic lines, but manifest unpredictably. The researchers here were attempting to identify triggering factors. Did they succeed? Partially. They discovered that exposure to specific energy harmonics could awaken latent abilities in genetically predisposed individuals. She looked up from the records, a new understanding in her eyes. The Guild didn't create conduits. They found a way to identify potential candidates early and ensure controlled development through the implants. Armed with both the security data and the modified modulation equipment, they continued their journey toward Helios Prime, making one final stop at a mining colony where a contact from Kale's Asteria days provided them with specialized drilling charges, originally designed for asteroid mining, but easily adaptable for their infiltration needs. Throughout their preparations, Kale noticed Seraphina's abilities continuing to develop as she grew accustomed to operating without guild limitations. Her telekinetic control became more precise, her energy perception more acute. She practiced extensively, learning to modulate her powers with subtle precision rather than the brute force approach the guild had conditioned her to use. More significantly, her personality continued to emerge from beneath layers of programming and control. She began expressing preferences, small things at first, like adjusting environmental settings on the ship or selecting particular foods when they restock supplies. She asked questions driven by curiosity rather than tactical necessity, and occasionally even displayed a dry sense of humor that caught Kale by surprise. One evening, as they reviewed their plans for Helios Prime, Kale found himself watching Seraphina as she manipulated a holographic representation of the facility, making adjustments to their infiltration route with graceful gestures that directed the display through thought as much as movement. "What?" she asked, noticing his attention. "I was just thinking about how different you are now," he replied honestly. "Not just your abilities, but you." Seraphina considered this for a moment. The guild's conditioning suppressed more than just physical capabilities. Emotional responses, individual preferences, curiosity. These were deemed unnecessary or potentially disruptive to optimal function. "And now I discover new aspects of myself daily," she said, a genuine smile briefly lighting her features. "It's disorienting, but exhilarating." "Any regrets?" Kale asked. "About helping me in the arena, about all of this?" Seraphina was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, I would not return to what I was. Even if freedom is temporary, it is worth experiencing." The sincerity in her voice stirred something in Kale, an admiration that had been growing steadily since her transformation, evolving into something deeper he wasn't yet ready to name. "It won't be temporary," he promised. "Whatever happens at Helios Prime, we'll find a way forward." Her violet eyes met his, searching. "You still think in terms of we. Even though your original goal has been accomplished, your colony has its oxygen solution. Some things are worth fighting for beyond practical necessity," Kale replied simply. Understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, unexpected but undeniable. "We should rest," Seraphina said eventually. "Tomorrow we make our final approach to Helios Prime." Helios Prime orbited a binary star system, perpetually bathed in the golden light that gave the facility its name. From a distance, it appeared almost beautiful, a gleaming installation of interconnected modules arranged in a perfect geometrical pattern that seemed to float serenely against the backdrop of twin suns. Its peaceful appearance belied its purpose and the formidable defenses that protected it. 3 layers of automated defense platforms surrounded the facility, supplemented by constant patrol vessels and a sensor net capable of detecting the energy signature of a single thruster ignition from half a system away. Kale and Seraphina approached in a supply vessel they'd acquired through their Shadowport contacts, a guild-registered transport with legitimate clearance codes for routine deliveries. Their modifications to the ship were concealed beneath surface-level compliance with guild specifications, while the modulation array masked Seraphina's unique conduit signature. "Approach vector locked," Kale reported as they neared the first layer of defenses. "Transmitting clearance codes now." Seraphina sat in a meditative posture, focusing on maintaining the careful energy modulation that would prevent detection of her liberated implants. First verification checkpoint in 30 seconds. Prepare for automated scan. The tense moments that followed tested Kale's mining navigator training, maintaining precise course while appearing routine, neither too cautious nor too confident. The automated systems scanned their vessel, comparing its energy signature and contents against expected parameters. "Verification complete," Seraphina announced as the system returned a green status indicator. proceeding to secondary checkpoint. They progressed through the defense layers with meticulous care, each successful verification bringing them closer to the facility itself. The final approach required direct communication with Helios Prime Control. Supply vessel Terran Dawn requesting docking clearance. Kale transmitted, using the identity they'd assumed. Scheduled maintenance delivery for Level 3 environmental systems. Terran Dawn, transmit crew manifest and final verification code, came the response. Kale sent the prepared documentation, while Serafina concentrated on projecting the appropriate energy signatures to satisfy any final scans. After a brief pause that felt eternal, their clearance was confirmed. Terran Dawn, proceed to docking Bay 7. Automated guidance engaged. They exchanged a brief glance of relief as the facility's guidance system took control of their approach, guiding them smoothly into a massive hangar where numerous other supply vessels were docked in ordered rows. Primary infiltration successful, Serafina observed quietly as they completed docking procedures. Phase 2 commences now. Phase 2 was considerably more dangerous. Moving through the facility to locate the central data core where Project Chimera's full specifications will be stored. Their supply worker disguises would provide limited access, but they would need to bypass multiple security checkpoints to reach their target. Remember, routine maintenance crews follow predictable patterns. Kale reminded himself as they disembarked, carrying standard-issue equipment cases that concealed their specialized tools and weapons. Confidence without hurry, purpose without suspicion. Serafina nodded, adjusting her worker's cap to partially shadow her distinctive eyes. The neural dampening patch she wore reduced the glow to normal levels, but her violet irises remained unusual enough to draw unwanted attention. They passed the initial security checkpoint without incident, their forged credentials accepted by the board security officer who barely glanced up from his monitoring station. Once inside the main facility corridors, they followed the maintenance routes indicated on the schematics they'd obtained, moving with purposeful efficiency that discouraged questions from the occasional passing guild personnel. The central data core is located 2 levels below us, Serafina murmured as they entered a service lift. Access requires elevated clearance, but I can interface with the security systems to create a temporary authorization window. The lift descended smoothly, depositing them in a corridor noticeably more secure than the upper levels. Fewer personnel, more automated monitoring systems, and subtle energy fields that Serafina identified as conduit detection barriers. Standard designed to prevent unauthorized conduit access, she explained, carefully modulating her energy signature to match authorized patterns. They never anticipated a conduit operating outside their control architecture. They approached a checkpoint guarded by both automated systems and 2 armed security officers. This would be their most challenging obstacle yet, the final barrier before the restricted research section. "Follow my lead," Serafina said quietly. "When I create the distraction, move directly to the right side maintenance access panel." Kale nodded, adjusting his grip on the equipment case as they approached the checkpoint. Identification and authorization. One of the guards requested, his tone professional but wary. They presented their forged credentials, which the guard inserted into a verification scanner. Kale maintained a carefully neutral expression, aware that any sign of tension might trigger suspicion. As the scanner processed their credentials, Serafina subtly extended her awareness into the facility's systems, identifying the specific frequencies used by the security network. With precise focus, she introduced a minor fluctuation in the environmental controls of Anir.